Hello.
We are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are Silverline. We are the premium comic book publisher for independent creators. And tonight, we welcome you to Wednesday Wham! We have a skeleton crew, but they are itching to get into our discussion tonight, which is going to be about pop culture and a lot of the rumors and gossip and actual events that are swirling around us, some comic related, some movie related, and others whatever you want to talk about. But before we get started, I have some announcements to make. First of all, as always, we want to thank our sponsor, the Daytona Beach Comic Con, or the Comic Book Convention. We always appreciate their support and their gracious hosting of our professionals. And we'd also like to announce some winners for a recent Silverline Comics giveaway. I think we actually have some graphics with their names, so we're gonna show them up here. The winners on the recent Make Mine Silverline Comics giveaway are Big Five Army. We have Dollar.cmx and Peter Palmiotti.
Really?
We obviously shout out our congratulations to them and well done. And in our next graphic, we're going to describe how they are to collect their prizes. If you would message Silverline Comics on Instagram at Silverline_comics with your mailing address and with your t-shirt size. That is once again, message Silverline Comics on Instagram at Silverline_comics with your mailing address. There it is, and your t-shirt size no later than 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday, October 15th. 2021. Otherwise, Roland will be forced to randomly pick other winners, and no one wants that to happen, especially you three lucky folks. So,
there'll be some very confused people in like another state getting random packages and not knowing what that is. He chooses people out of a phone book.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that being said, we've got a lot to cover tonight. So let's get right to it. There's a lot of big movies out right now. Two of them would probably be on the top of my list would be Venom and also No Time to Die, the new James Bond movie. I was informed off the air just before we began the broadcast that our favorite inker and the Empress of the Inks herself, Barbara J. Kjellberg, has seen the Venom film. And so we're going to open up the How did the Venom film turn out? Did it meet expectation? Did it exceed? Give us the skinny.
Well, as usual, Tom Hardy did an absolutely fantastic job with his portrayal, and the entire cast was just spot on. I enjoyed it tremendously. The only criticism I think I would have to make is that when the Venom voice was speaking, sometimes his voice was so gravelly that I couldn't understand what he was saying. But other than that, and the Easter egg at the end was really confusing. But that's probably why they call it an Easter egg, because you're left wondering to know what was going on. Lots of fantastic action, beautiful cinematography. And plenty of humor. We have a pair of chickens that I really got attached to.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
What would you tell? Let's say the fan of Venom and Carnage out there, the fans, and what would you tell them they can expect? Is this true to the comics, or do they take liberties? Are they going to be happy with the interpretations?
No, I think they're going to be happy with the interpretation. Venom has come a long way since the last movie. He's very much indoctrinated into the human society now, mostly with all the the picadillos that come along with having human feelings and everything like that. And so he complains a lot. He has his own ideas of what should happen, and they don't mesh with Tom's character. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and the character, or I mean the interpretation of Carnage is definitely scary enough. It's very kind of bloody.
And for those who may be new to the Venom Carnage universe, give them a little, soundbite version of who Venom is, the symbiote, and then how Carnage came about. Just for folks who might be curious but not sure what those characters are.
Well, Venom is an alien symbiote from the last movie that infects. I can't remember Tom's name.
Eddie Brock.
Eddie Brock.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he infects Eddie Brock, and it turns out that Eddie is really the only perfect match for him, who's able to hold the symbiote, because he's just such an overpowering presence inside his body. So they have to share the body, and Venom has a habit of talking inside his head a lot. And so Eddie looks like he's very schizophrenic most of the time. And at the beginning of this movie, we see that Venom has really, really taken up the challenge of learning all the human things, but he's fighting against Eddie because Eddie won't let him eat people's brains.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
I remember there was a Venom toy years ago that if you hit a button, it's like, I'm going to eat your brains. I always thought that was hilarious for a kid's toy. I'm like, what a kid's toy?
Yeah. And he keeps wanting, he's got these 2 chickens for him in the apartment that Venom is supposed to be eating, but Venom has gotten attached to him and he won't eat him.
Apparently I am. And he still spelled my last name wrong. Tommy, dude.
Tommy's making himself known with commentary on the screen. Come on and join us if you dare, Tommy. You'll join the arena of discussion. Barb, what about the one
Carnage?
can imagine a lot of situational comedy when with the sort of body being inhabited by this character, and how is that played? I mean, do we have a lot of that in this movie?
Oh, we have a lot of that.
Okay.
And Woody Harrelson plays the serial killer who gets infected with the Carnage symbiote. And I'm not going to tell you how he gets infected.
Oh, good.
I'm going to leave that up to you guys to figure it out.
They kind of gave it away in the trailer.
Yeah, but it turns out that red symbiotes are like 10 times scarier, a bit more badass than the black symbiotes.
Mm-hmm.
And Venom's like, we're going to die. So it's a lot of fun. I gave it 2 thumbs up.
Awesome. Phil,
Nice. Hey, Phil
says, "Hey, yo, Silverline peeps." Shout out to Phil. How you doing, man? Thanks for joining us tonight.
I heard.
No, it's always been curious aspect of Carnage. They made use of the red symbiote also in a Spider-Man story where he infected the Green Goblin and became the Red Goblin. You guys remember that run a few years back? It was a short Spider-Man storyline. Did any of you guys read that?
No, Tommy, the damage has already been done. I'm just going to weep a little bit. It's okay. It's okay.
So you just throwing grenades at us now? Is that just lobbing those grenades from outside?
I'm not a huge Spider-Man reader, so ask me about the Avengers or Iron Man. But
you reminded me when you said the red symbiotes are notoriously more dangerous and so on. They really made use of the fact that when the Green Goblin became the Red Goblin, they really went over the top with it and did a tremendous job with the little story arc there. It was cool.
Remember that? It's funny. I watched an interview with Todd McFarlane, and he talked about his impetus for making Venom, because he's the one that created Venom, was because he didn't want to draw the black suit. He wanted to draw Spider-Man's original suit. So he just took the suit off Spider-Man and made it alive. That was his big impetus for doing it. It's like, I don't want to draw this suit. I want to draw the Spider-Man suit. And so he did that.
I had a fan come up to me at a show several times and say, dude, if you ever draw Spider-Man in the black suit, man, that's the one I want. And I'm thinking, okay, man, sure, that's great. I get it. Everybody has their favorite, but I'm more like Todd, where I prefer the red and blue as well.
I've always liked the black suit. I think sometimes I thought it was pretty slick. It was very that stark contrast. I thought was pretty
Yeah.
cool. I mean, they
Yeah.
want now they've kind of changed his red and blue suit. Now they sometimes draw it red and black. It just
They
depends on some
do.
of the art. Yeah.
A lot of that is sort of a nod to its origins.
Okay. Yeah.
Spidey suit was a lot of red and black.
They
It
have
gives it a vintage feel to it. The
Yeah.
red and blue is much more the Ramita suit that we all grew up with. The one that the
Right.
masks came from and T-shirts. But
That was the one
no,
I remember.
As an inker, I'm always fond of the more black, so
Yeah.
less
I
to
know,
ink.
it's like easier to.
Yeah, less
Yeah.
to ink. Throw out
It's
those,
easier to
bring in
draw,
those black
too.
suits. That's right.
I guess though my affection is mostly nostalgia. Having first been introduced to Spider-Man in the red and blue with the Ramita web distancing and the bigger oval eyes that are not oversized but kind of medium.
Yeah.
I always thought that is one of the coolest superhero suits I've ever seen because it was so unique and strange that it's
At
unforgettable.
the time it was, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
now of course we've gotten much. And I remember in the black suit they changed where his webbing come out. He didn't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like came out the top of his hand. I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
they did
Remember
that
that?
too.
They didn't do it like this.
It came out this
Everybody
little
loves
white
that.
spot, and it would come out on the
Yeah,
top
it's
of
the
his
white
hand.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. No, it's
Yeah.
flip.
By the
I'm
way-
sorry. It's flip. Flip.
That's right. Since we're on Spidey briefly, do you guys like the organic or mechanical webbing? What do you think, Barb?
I always
Mechanical or organic webbing?
Organic.
Organic.
like the
Makes
organic?
more sense.
Mhm.
I always
Okay.
like the mechanical, like you mean him building his wrist things?
Yeah.
I always liked that because it was like the science nerd that kind of hinted
Yeah,
at that.
but you see, to me, that I'm a very logical person, and to me, you have where are you going to keep all your inventory, your supplies? It's going to run out. You're in the middle of a
Yeah.
battle. Oh my god!
And that happened. You know what? That happened.
Yeah.
Spaghetti webbing, Phil says.
that
That's
was
right. That's right.
McFarlane's.
Trademark
take again, Tom
McFarlane. I
McFarlane.
love that too.
Yeah.
It takes forever to draw, though. Trust me, I've done that. type of
Where's he
webbing.
store all the solution? I mean, he needs tanks on his
Well,
back.
If you look at some of the early stories, the Ramita
He has
series,
cartridges that like hook
he has
around.
cartridges. It almost looks
Yeah.
like an old-fashioned digital watch band.
I
in a
remember
way.
those, but that can't possibly hold a whole
Oh
lot.
no, absolutely not. And
It's very much a suspension of disbelief to think
It
that
is.
he can swing through entire New York with just these little cartridges worth of stuff on his wrist.
they did that for quite a bit. Now you assume too he had some in his belt too because that belt had some. But either
His
way,
utility belt.
Yeah.
they used that though to advantage in many a story. He would run out and just drop to the street and have to deal with not having any webbing. So to me, it was like the wonders of science and all that. That's right,
I took a
science.
figure, huh?
I was listening to an 80s retro thing today and it had Thomas Dolby's She Blinded Me with Science. So every time somebody brings up science, I want to yell out science, but anyway.
Yeah.
But then again, I suppose the argument could be made that if he's doing it organically, they have to come from some sort of glands or something like that. And the glands would run out too.
I
And
just
so you
thought
have time to rebuild it.
Saw it was funny in the movie that it just sheer dumb luck that they happen to have two ways to extend webbing on his wrist. What luck? Not like out of his, butt or mouth. It just happened to be
Yeah,
right where he needed it the most. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
and most
some
spiders
things
have
are done
one gland. He happened to have two.
In their butt.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
Some
they
things
actually
are
do
just
have
a-
two spinnerets that actually make one. Most spiders have two, and then they mix them. But yeah, it just happens to be,
I never
hey,
look that close
look
because
how
I'm
convenient
arachnophobic.
now. It's
I'm
superheroes, so you
arachnophobic
go with
too,
it.
as a matter of fact. That's interesting. Some things are just done for aesthetic reasons, Aaron. You just don't want.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see it out the
I
other
still
end.
think there was a scene in like the third one where he's lowering Mary Jane on this webbing, and I always remember that scene. It's like, man, that's nasty. That's coming out of his body and stuff. That's ew. Like I'm like, is the webbing warm? I mean, I'm like,
Is it warm? Oh
I-
man. Oh,
It's like
see, I didn't
snot.
go there.
You
I
wonder
didn't
these
even-
things. It's out of his body. I mean,
Oh,
can you
wow.
imagine
Boy,
like
we're
somebody
gonna-
like ejecting like this webbing out of their hand and like grab it? You'd be like, I ain't gonna grab that.
Right. See, I always thought of it more like silly string, like a super strong industrial
Yeah.
silly
Yeah,
string.
silly string,
You
yeah.
know, if you're old enough to remember what silly string is.
Oh, I
Oh, yeah,
definitely am old enough to
I
remember.
love those
what
things,
it
but
Yeah.
the cans wouldn't last long. He'd be like, and then like
is. Exactly.
Ah, it's over with. I know. So yeah, that's how I pictured it. But yeah, Spidey. What do you guys think? Like, are we going to stay with Tom Holland? Are we going to go back to like Spidey on his own without the tech? I mean, what are your thoughts on where Spidey goes from
we
here?
already know that they left. Are they already making another Spider-Man movie to
didn't they
pick
show a
up?
trailer
Rumor
for
is.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they left it wide open at the
Oh, yeah.
where everybody finds out who he is.
Yeah, I like the science savant idea in the cartridges. It made him.
I
Yeah.
did too. See, that's the one thing I didn't like, and Barb's gonna hate this because she's such a Tony fan, or should I say an RDJ fan more so. But you know, depending so much on Tony Stark kind of gets in my craw because I always thought, you know, Peter is one of the top 5 minds in the Marvel U.
Yeah, he's
And
like
it was
yeah.
he was up there. You know, it was like Reed Richards, Victor Von Doom, you know, Tony
Well,
and Peter. They're kind of up
that's
there in
why-
the top 4.
That's why Tony left Peter those glasses to basically take up where Tony left
Right.
off.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just always kind of cool to me. It's like, wow, this teenager is a total savant. He's a phenom. He can come up with all this cool stuff. So that's what, yeah, he you
But
know,
he's also dirt poor,
yeah,
Yeah.
so
He
he
is.
always needed Tony to help him out.
right.
I
How
was
did he
like-
do it in the comics though? When Tony wasn't funding everything, you got to wonder. Like, I think he used a lot of his scholarship money because he was brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I know in the
So-
comics, doesn't he work for like a science lab or did?
Well, he
like, he
worked for the
worked for
Daily
us-
Bugle, but they didn't pay him anything.
Yeah,
you
but
know?
now I think in the comic, and I don't know if this is, but I know he eventually worked for like some sort of science lab, which it made sense.
In some storylines he worked for Doc Ock. In other storylines, he
Yeah.
became like a Tony Stark 2, where he started his own
Mhm.
corporation.
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
the
there's something
Parker
like
Corp.
that too.
Yeah,
And they keep
Yeah.
devolving. I mean, he's always going to stay young. I mean, you're never going to have old Spider-Man, I guess.
Oh, you
Um,
did in the Miles Morales one, the
yeah,
Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah,
Could have old
relatively old.
Spidey,
Yeah. Yeah,
old
I don't
man
know.
Spider-Man.
I
Wow,
always liked the Andrew
Old
Garfield
disillusioned
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. He was jaded,
Yeah.
jaded.
jaded Spidey. That would just be weird.
With a
Because
little
Spidey's-
tubby.
Spidey is the ultimate. You know, between the 2 most optimistic Boy Scouts in the Marvel U, to me, have to be Peter Parker and Cap. And if you stop and
Yeah.
think about it, they sort of became superheroes the same way, one voluntarily and one involuntarily, but they were both super nerds, you know,
Yeah.
who became like who they are. So they have a lot in common if you stop and think about Peter Parker
That's true.
hanging out
He's-
with,
That's how he
with
gets his
Steve
funding.
Rogers. Funded through selling webbing solution on eBay. Yeah, possibly. Good one,
He'd
Phil.
make millions
Awesome.
off that.
I know, right? Yeah, just sell the web spinners, you know, on the web shooters. On
Well, now if you think about it, the solution that he developed is super, super strong. It's like
Mhm.
liquid steel, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. it's
So
supposed
I
to-
mean, you would think that there would be so many real world applications for something
yeah.
like that.
That you could, yeah.
He could be a billionaire.
well,
law
this is why it was so funny.
military.
Yeah, even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, that like Tony Stark does like nanotechnology, and I'm like,
Yeah.
if that technology really existed, the world wouldn't look like it does in the movies. I mean, you could completely transform the world or something like that. So
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mhm.
They should. I mean, and it was something maybe he can only make so much of it or very limited. But
It's
I mean, he's
probably
literally building
extremely
matter from nothing.
Expensive.
Yeah,
Like each one of those suits are supposed to cost like $6 million or more, you know, just for one
Yeah.
suit.
Yeah.
So
So-
not everybody, not your local person on the street could afford the nanites or the suits or anything like that. You know, it would
Mhm.
have to be a billionaire.
So
Yeah.
So when getting back to Venom for a moment, so the way it sounds like they structure the story is that Carnage is our out of control villain. So Venom has to put on his anti-hero hat and sort of protect everyone from a worse
Oh,
preach.
he's totally into the superhero gig, except for the occasional desire to eat people's brains. But
What
he really, really wants to go out, and because he's bored most of the time, but he really wants to go out and be the superhero.
Oh, okay.
what is your take on them making villains heroes anymore? Like the anti once villains get popular, they want to
Well,
make them the
he's not a
anti-hero.
very good hero. I just said
Yeah.
he wanted to be a
Oh
hero.
yeah. Well, no, I'm just saying in comics in general. 'Cause, like even Catwoman's supposed to be relatively kind of good now because she's married to Batman.
It's an old fashioned trope or
Yeah.
cliche, more so, to sort of take the villain and turn them good. Well, in terms
Redemption
of
arc.
Catwoman
Yeah.
specifically, because they like to bring her into romantic relationships with the heroes,
Mhm.
specifically Batman. I don't know. I mean, they did it with Emma Frost, which I'm out on that. I'm like, she's a bad guy. Sorry, always be a
Yeah,
bad guy.
she is. Yeah, there's when her and Scott like got together. I'm like,
Scott
I
would
quit reading X Men a
no.
long time ago, but I would hear
I
about
think
it, or my friend would loan me X Men books to read.
I think a lot of people like the redemption arc because they see themselves in it. They go, "Oh, if
Yeah.
I think that's
I
a good point.
yeah,
Excellent point.
I can be a good person. I'm not always horrible." They see
Mm-hmm.
themselves in becoming better than what they are right
Mm-hmm.
now. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't really hold with them all that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just if you
I
take
just
away the
there's
villains,
I
then
embrace my darkness.
yeah.
well,
Uh,
Emma Frost has a unique position in the X-Men universe, in that she really is one of those people, based on how she was written for decades, that it's
Yeah.
really difficult to trust that someone like that would ever have a redemption arc, where other characters you might buy a little bit more, like, Psylocke,
Yeah.
the Quanon figure becoming a superhero kind of thing, or even Wolverine. Wolverine has a more believable arc, I think, than Emma
Ambiguous.
Frost.
Yeah, the one thing they've taken away from, and I don't know how much they write it in the books that much, but when Claremont wrote him, he was always struggling. Is he an animal? Is he a man? You know,
Yeah.
And I think that was something they kind of wrote out of his character, which I was kind of bummed because of that eternal struggle that he can go off and kill people at random, because it's like he had to keep that in control to keep his humanity, and they kind of wrote that out. I'm like, I don't know, I like that part of his character. Thought
We
that's
are
been interesting.
most of us anyway, are all morally ambiguous, and we have to
Yeah,
choose every day when we get up to be
Mm-hmm.
good. And I think the whole is he a super, or is he a hero, or is he a villain, is just that day he decided to get up and be good,
yeah,
and make a better change. But I mean, that's why we have um, people who are psychos, because they don't have that ability to discern right from wrong. They're
Yeah.
pathological.
And they have to choose.
They're
It's
sociopaths
interesting.
and
Sociopath, yeah.
psychopaths.
It's interesting to put that filter on the X-Men, but specifically Wolverine. I think that's possibly what made him one of the most popular characters, because of that internal struggle. Is he a good guy, or I often compare him to a technological werewolf, because it's kind of what he is.
yeah.
But
He was made off a bet. Did you know that?
yeah,
He
a
was made off
bet.
a bet. Yeah, they bet whether or not they can make a Canadian superhero popular.
That's really cool.
And so he made Wolverine and made him Canadian, and I guess the guy won the bet. Yeah, that's what I heard.
Well, he's got that interesting internal struggle. They
Yeah.
tended to, it was timing, and it was the artist and the writer and all that. But I think that will remain as long as they give him that struggle. The
Yeah.
X-Men themselves, I think, will evolve into a new, less morally ambiguous team, because right now the way Hickman and the way they're being written a lot is they're very morally ambiguous. A lot, the whole
Yeah.
movement is, because they've become this sort of, I don't know, it's just they're kind of antagonistic toward humanity, and that's not how they were originally created, to be very much
Yeah.
more like Superman,
They can't
and now they're
Yeah.
sort of
possibly
antagonistic.
they can't possibly be as bad as the boys.
Yeah, well, they were
Well,
quite kind of
yeah.
written to be that bad
Well,
from
they
the
formed their
beginning.
own island. I heard that. Now, I don't quote me on this, but I heard that Jonathan Hickman has left the X-Men. I'm not
Oh, I
sure
didn't know
what's
that.
surrounding that. If he left voluntarily, I'm sure it was voluntarily. I didn't hear
Sure.
anything involuntary, but I've heard that he has left or decided not to do that. So I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I read, my friend loaned me a bunch of Jonathan Hickmans where they like created this island of Krakoa and all that. And I
Yeah.
there wasn't. I just didn't ever. I really liked Chris Claremont's take on the X-Men, and ever since then, I've never really found a writer that's really been able to nail what I liked about Claremont. Kind of made them almost like these like sort of secret society, almost like a Scanners, like my friend Tom says, almost like a Scanners type movie, where there's
Yeah.
these people, and they were very rare. That was the one thing. With there were mutants were very few and small in between. They were much more rare in his when he wrote the story, and there was no. I hate the X gene. I absolutely hate the X gene with a passion, because that's not how genetics work. And I'm just like I know like genetics can't make somebody do weather, but I mean Claremont was originally like, well, it's just pollution, other things happening in the world that were affecting the world has created these sort of jumps and mutations. Like, okay, I can guess I could buy that. But no, now there's a gene that create all mutant powers. Like, no, that's stupid. Genetics doesn't work that way. The people like, yeah, it's a comic book. Like, I don't care. I don't care. There,
Some
there's
based in reality.
I can suspend disbelief on some things, and there's some things where I'm like, no, that's stupid. No.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it has to be. Yeah, it has to be somewhat anchored in some sort of reality. Yeah.
right, and the fact that I know pretty much like a lot of not a lot, but I know basically how genetics works. I'm like now. But yeah, and so when they started when the X-Men went back to the mansion and became the X-Men team, that's why I kind of lost interest. I liked them when they were more like this underground, like when they lived in the outback in Australia, if you read that. Like there
Yeah.
were these sort of punk rock, sort of like underground, like ragtag team of heroes, and they went back to school. Now we got it. I'm like, nah, I don't like that. Too superheroish. I like them when they were superheroes, but were not superheroes, and now they've made them too super. And now with the island and all the politics or whatever, I'm like, nah, that's stupid too.
It got too political. In the old days, it was much
Yeah.
more about people don't like us, so
Right.
we keep to ourselves. But they were altruistic enough to be like, look, they don't like us because they don't understand us. So,
Yeah.
Xavier was sort of the, look, we're gonna protect humanity. We're gonna use these powers to protect humanity against evil mutants, right?
To show them
Which
that not all
Magneto
mutants
was.
are evil. That is basically show them that we're human, not all mutants are evil. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not all. And so then, their behavior then, qualified them as heroic and having that moral anchor of, look, we're not, you can spit on us, but we're going to protect you, which
Right.
elevated them to like a Superman
This higher
level
moral
of,
ground. Yeah.
right. We could rule the world if we wanted to, but we choose to coexist and protect, which made them
Right.
really, really cool. And a lot of
now
them
with
didn't want to do that.
yeah, and now with Krakoa and their own island, that completely defeats that point because
Yeah.
now they're not
Now
trying to
it's
blend and show
more.
them a better way. They're completely separate, and now
Yeah.
the humans are this other species we have to fight. And I'm like, okay, that's yeah. I didn't know.
That has nothing. I mean, if that's where you want to go, you want to write a novel. I mean, go
Yeah.
for it. You want to do that, go for it. But have some of the old part too that launch. That brings me to this. It's really funny when people want to reimagine. It's like, dude, what made them great is what made them great. Okay,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a recipe for your favorite apple pie, favorite dessert, your favorite steak, your favorite meal. You don't have to reimagine it. You know why? Because the recipe made it great.
Right.
Keep that recipe and it will remain great. Some things don't need to be reimagined. Some things don't need to be reinvented. Some things do, and you can reinvent them and make them fun, but why trash the original idea that made them great? Like have your what ifs and have your spin-offs and do all that crazy stuff, but keep a core title base that remains what made it great.
Yeah.
I think maybe they're afraid to do that because that would outsell all the crazy spinoff stuff. So,
I don't know why they tend to. Yeah, I'm the same way. Instead of reimagining them in their own universe, just do a separate own idea. I've never. I understand from a financial point of view. It's like, well, X-Men already has an audience built in, so if we reimagine X-Men, we already have an audience built into it. It's harder to do something new. But relatively, you hardly see new things anymore. You do, but it's always based on something else. I mean, the fact that most new things are described like, well, this is like Lord of the Rings in space or something. Like it's always they describe something that's like this is like something else, and I'm like,
yeah, yeah. There's nothing new. I mean, look,
yeah,
at some point you realize there's nothing new. Okay,
yeah,
everything's just rejumbled, right, and relabeled
yeah,
with but it's all the same stuff. So that's why I always say to me, creativity is a lot like cooking, right?
yeah,
You got a recipe that works, stick with the recipe. There's a reason people are like, it's like your grandma used to make,
yeah,
Some of us
What
still like the X-Men like grandma used to make.
yeah.
We
That's why I
like the
liked it.
what
classics.
do you guys think of the upcoming Eternals movie?
I was never an Eternals guy. I'm not sure what they do. Is it like a pantheon of godlike beings protecting humanity from afar, and then they have to interact with
Well,
humanity? That's kind of my feeling.
supposedly, and I've never read the Eternals. I just got this from the movie,
Mm-hmm.
the movie previews. Is that
Trailer.
they've always been hanging back and just watching, and they've had a stipulation that they can't mess with society. But after Thanos comes, and something to do with the snap changes all of that. And so now that they
Okay.
have to they have to step up to the plate.
That
There's
can be
the
fun.
it seems I'm not sure what to make. I'm not sure about this. So anybody out there in internet land, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think Jack Kirby was. I know Jack Kirby created the New Gods for DC, but I think he actually went to DC to create the New Gods because he created the Eternals and then Marvel didn't like or something didn't work. So he went to DC. And so I think they're both were both created by. He had this really big thing about creating Pantheon of Gods. I don't know if that was Jack Kirby's
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember New Gods took a foothold, and I think Eternals was a sort of failed attempt to do that at Marvel first, and then it went. But they kept them, and I don't know. I don't see when they started together. I don't see much difference between the Eternals and the Inhumans. They're both kind of like these Pantheon of godlike characters.
And don't forget the
Mm-hmm.
crew with Big Barda and all those guys too.
Yeah, that's the Inhumans.
The
Oh no,
Inhumans.
wait, that's the New Gods.
That's the new guys.
Yeah, that's DC. Yeah, okay, no.
The Eternals, according to the internet, they're idealized humanoid aliens from the planet Olympia. They're genetically engineered by the Celestials, who are another level of godlike beings. But they defend humanity, sort of thing. So again, it's almost reinventions of the ancient cultural myths. Everything from Egypt to Greece and Rome and Scandinavia.
Olympia or Olympus.
Yes.
And of course they already deal with the Norse pantheon of gods with Thor and
Odin
and all that. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think they're getting too out there to the point where if you have, I mean, they keep going higher in power to now like, okay, well, if you have the Eternals out there, I guess now the Avengers are obsolete because now you have the Eternals that are godlike are doing it. I saw, and they're pretty much, it seemed like they're making them all Supermans or I don't know. I saw some guys shooting eye lasers. I'm like, okay, I like Superman. I I personally don't like the Justice League was always an allegory to the Greek gods. I mean, that was always, I mean, everything about that was but then to make these sort of race of godlike being these Eternals, I just think they should kind of stick with the street level. Like Avengers should be the highest. I think they're getting when they start going like too cosmic, like godlike, then it's like, and it
What's
always seemed
next?
really weird to me that you have these like eternal, amazing beings, and they want to protect Earth out of like all the supposed civilizations, aliens like Earth. This is also drives me nuts every time. This is a science fiction trope. Like every time, like roaming the galaxy and finding other civilizations. Like humanity just always seems to be the most unique and impressive of all the species we find. I'm just like, okay, come on. Like humanity is the most special and that needs to be protected. I'm like, I
The
don't know. I
human
think if a
spirit.
god, yeah, I think if a god came to our Earth, he'd be like, these primitives are. I ain't touching them. Let them kill themselves. I just don't think they would.
This
But
is
I
the
mean,
most petty bunch of
how cynical of you, Aaron. How cynical.
I know. But it just seems so. I mean, like I said, they addressed like why weren't they around? And to me, it would be funny when the movie like why weren't you around before? I would just be like because they didn't write the movie until now. If they ever broke the fourth wall and did that, because that's obviously why they weren't around. They didn't write the movie then.
Well, I do know that I think the reason the Eternals come along is what Barb teased, and that is Thanos. He is an eternal deviant, so whatever
Oh,
that means. So what we're gonna, I guess, discover is that he's like one that went rogue, and the snap and all of that. And it's like, hey, what have you done to humanity? Well, you get the idea that humanity in the Marvel U, that humanity is just one of the shepherded species, by
yeah.
these super beings. So the only reason we
They're
focus
protecting
on
him
it,
for
Aaron, is
whatever.
because
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
that's
they
all we would
also,
ever read. I mean,
one of the
so
things that
most
the
people,
preview said too was that they've always thought that they were all that in a bag of chips, basically. And
yeah.
then it was a human with just a snap of the finger changed the course of the entire universe. A human. And so they can't keep their heads in the sand any longer. They gotta, you know, they
I
Mm-hmm.
gotta
have to
step
admit,
up.
though,
Mm-hmm.
I always thought I never could wrap my head around they changed the plan for Thanos' plan when he snapped the fingers was like that plan eventually doesn't work. Does it? It was one of those things like he snaps the fingers and kills half the life in the universe to save resources. I'm like, well, yeah, but then they'll just repopulate again. You'll be back to the same problem. Like,
Actually, if
wouldn't
you
it
look at
like
it,
like
if
to me?
you
I
look
guess
at
if you
it
snap the
logically,
finger and made like infinite resources, wouldn't that be better or something? I don't
if you look at it logically, it would have been more than half of the universe because when he snapped the finger, he took out people like the airplane pilot
know. Yeah,
or the doctor in the middle of a surgery, and then there was the people who couldn't cope with it and commit suicide. So it was probably more like 2/3 of the universe that he ended up
it seemed
killing
like a
as a
really
result of the snap.
right. It seemed like a really weird plan to save life by killing life, especially
Well,
if
that's why
life
he was a
repopulates
psycho.
itself.
Sounds
Yeah,
a little bit like Adrian Veidt from Watchmen, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's
I
kind of
just
his
like Thanos'
solution.
original idea when he killed half the universe to try to, woo death. That was my
Dad,
favorite. I
that
know
was
they
my
couldn't
favorite.
do that, but if they would have done that, I would have given them props because I thought that was such a cool concept when I heard it, and then they
Off the
changed it
wall.
like he's. I mean, yeah. So I didn't like that. I
Yeah.
didn't like what they did with Thanos' backstory. The character itself was okay. I was like, no, he's supposed to be completely nuts. That's what kind of made him such a threat because you just know what
Mhm.
this guy was gonna do. He was nuts.
Did you like
So
Did you like Hela in Thor Ragnarok? Did you
yeah,
I
I
like
did
did.
like
that?
I
her.
did. I liked
Yeah,
her a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah, I like that too.
But
Yeah.
and I'm not the only one that have said that the cinematic Marvel universe had a problem with nailing villains. I've heard other people talk about this too. I'm not quite sure why. I think they kind of downplay the threat of the villains. Like they made Ultron kind of snarky, and like Ultron is just supposed to be like this like living Terminator that's just like destroying us. So like okay, when they started making him snarky, I'm like, yeah, that's no
They made him relatable.
E-
It's
relatable.
it's
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I
Loki,
think Barb, you've hit on it. It's relatable. You know
right?
what their test is going to be, Aaron? Their test is going to be, can they do Victor Von Doom? Because
Yeah,
you know you can write him
but
as
you can't make him
Vader. You can
snarky.
write him a little bit as sympathetic.
But you can't write him
But
snarky or goofy.
well, they better damn well make him talk in the third person, all right? It
he
won't
better
be
talk
Victor
in the
Don.
Yeah.
third person, and he better say things like, Doom will not speak to you again, or you will die. Stuff
Yeah.
like where it's just like these pronouncements where he sounds like he's just on a throne looking down his nose at everybody, because that's what makes him Doom.
Yeah. I
That's what
think
makes him
that's the
cool.
one character. My favorite villain was Kang the Conqueror, and I heard they weren't going to put Kang in. Now I've heard that they are.
Kang is in the U, man. He's at the end of Loki.
Oh, is he? Okay. I haven't
Yeah.
watched Loki. I haven't watched any of the. I finally got around to watching The Mandalorian and finished that the other night. I'm very far behind on stuff. I usually watch superhero stuff, and then I'm like, oh, the third season of Sex Education's on or something, and then I have to watch. Um, I don't know. I sometimes like I watch like science fiction stuff a little bit, but I seem to get more in the dramas because I can listen to them while I work.
Right.
Superhero stuff, like
Well,
even with the Mandalorian, I kept having to like, okay, they're fighting. What was going on? Like so.
hey,
To me,
but
it didn't.
you did like that last episode, right, of season 2. You dug
Of
that.
Mandalorian,
Right?
yeah. I'd be
Yeah.
curious to see how they're going to bring Luke back more and more. If I don't think he's going to be a major character, but yeah. I did like it. The Mandalorian. The one thing I think, and I understand it's like Lone Wolf and Cub. He keeps getting like I guess what you call side quests. Like,
Yeah.
like he comes to the planet, you're like, well, I need you to help me fix my ship. Really? Well, we have the side quest you can do, and I'm like, oh, okay. And they eventually make it tie into the overall plot, but the guy can't go anywhere without somebody like, "Hey, do you want to like risk your life for me so I can repair your ship?" Oh, okay. Like this always happens to the
Yeah.
dude, like constantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he goes to the water
Mhm.
planet. Oh, I need to repair your ship. Oh, do you want to like and they ask to go find the Mandos, and they trick it. Oh, you got to help us defeat this. And he's always like, I rarely does the guy fight for himself. I mean, when the kid was, I guess I could care about spoilers. It's been out long enough. The kid gets kidnapped. Like, oh, now he has it, but most of the time it's just helping his
Yeah.
friends. He never gets paid. All he got paid in the whole
Yeah.
movie was the spear. Like, so I'm like, they don't give him any money. They just repair his ship, and then
Where
I
does he
guess
get
maybe
the
they give him
fuel
some
for his
cash.
ship?
Yeah.
Well,
And then
he-
they literally eventually obliterate it in the last episode. So I'm like, guess you're not repairing that, are you? So I don't know.
You know, Katie Sackhoff's character
Yeah.
plays a huge role in what's going to happen with him because she's royalty on Mandalore.
Yeah, she was a
You'll
big part of
find
the
that
Clone
out.
Wars cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
she was
and so she his destiny and hers are sort of intertwined the way they're playing it. And so Luke training Grogu, I think that's gonna be intertwined with it, but also the fate of the Katie Sackhoff character. Can't think of her name right at the moment. But
yeah, I can't.
That all ties together.
Yeah, and the dark saber. So I liked what I saw. I just kind of felt bad for the guy. I mean, everywhere he went, it's like, well, you like to blow crap up. Why don't you help him?
Yeah.
God. Like it's
Hey,
never like you want to
come
get a
do
beer
this
and
for
watch
us.
some TV.
We need our fence fixed. You know.
I know the poor guy. Like he's just yeah. So I kind of felt he goes to the the planet with the spiders.
Bo-Katan Kryze is her name. Bo-Katan Kryze.
Yeah.
She's a character from the Clone Wars. But that's that particular storytelling device exists in the iconic template in which the Mandalorian exists, which is the lone gunslinger.
Wandering from town to town.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know exactly. It just like it just seemed like I feel the same way when like well, I guess Conan actually looks for adventure, but like when you have other people who wander, the Mandalorian. I guess because they kind of said he was a bounty hunter, so he has a price. Like always have a price. He just never got paid. I'm like, poor guy.
That I guess the kid melted his heart, kind of a thing, which is like whatever, but. A lot of people, I have a friend who loathes the Mandalorian simply because he's not badass enough. Like, why does he care about that little kid anyway? I mean, he's supposed to be the most badass, warrior, blah blah blah. And it's like, well, but that's the lone wolf and cub thing. It reached him for some reason.
For some reason,
so
something they care about or whatever.
Yeah. More than money.
I consider The Mandalorian probably a sequel to the original trilogy because I don't like the last 3 movies they did because it seems they tie in Luke. I'm like, okay, that makes more sense. I like the other characters. I like the Carrie or who was the big buff rebel lady. I think her name is she's played by the MMA fighter. I don't remember her name in the film.
Gina
Carano.
Her character I liked. I don't think she's in the series anymore. I don't know. Maybe she is or whatever. I know she said.
I think they're talking about bringing her back. Her name was Cara Dune.
Yeah, she says some bad stuff on the internet. I guess
And she got canceled.
She got censored. Yeah. Darn it! I hate when that happens.
So
I wanted to bring something out here that I know Aaron's not a huge Bond fan. Barb hasn't seen the movie yet, but I would be remiss if I did not at least bring up No Time to Die. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but this particular film is the 5th and final Daniel Craig chapter. And this really rounds out the 5-issue story arc that they began with Casino Royale. You really get the idea that what they were doing with Craig, and this may be what they do in the future, since they've run out of Ian Fleming novels, and that is that this cohesive universe is almost like when an auteur director gets hold of a long-standing character franchise like Chris Nolan did and David Goyer did with Dark Knight. Okay, so they did their trilogy, and that exists, but it exists in its own universe, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of considered canon, not canon. That's kind of how No Time to Die feels like they're putting it in. It's the Daniel Craig verse. So if
Well, that
you
was
like
the first
Daniel
time they
Craig,
connected, because I remember when I watched the old Bond movies, like each movie was its own separate thing. Really, they didn't really connect to any other movie.
they did both in the early days, and then they just ran off on tangents because of various reasons, whether it was too hard to tie them in or this, that, and the other. But when they started out, they wanted to tie the through lines, at least the novels that were connected. They wanted to connect them. And so they're trying to do that here. I think because now in the pop culture interpretation of fiction, televised fiction specifically, you have a more serialized mentality with things. So people, I think, like that and accept it more than the one shot, oh, it's a megalomaniac here. Oh, it's Spectre over here. Oh, it's, the Russians over here. Because, even this was kind of interesting to me too. Ian Fleming was a member of the Cold War. He actually worked for the British government. Bond in his early days actually fought Russians, communists, right? Especially from Russia with Love. I mean, it's very clear that we were fighting the communists. The decoder device that he got needed to not fall into enemy hands, etc. But in the film screenplay, they made it a Spectre thing, right? Working and manipulating the Soviet government as well as our government, as well as world governments. They did that here as well. And I think they do that to sort of stay out of politics and stay in the fantasy realm. So they keep Spectre the sort of overarching villainous organization behind the scenes that sort of manipulates everybody from governments to people to cultures and all that. But it's a well-made film. If you're a Bond fan, parts of it are going to annoy you, possibly disturb you, because they do some things. I didn't give it all away to you, Barb, by the way, just in my opening there before the broadcast.
That's good, because I'm not going to see it until this coming week.
You're gonna be blown away by what they do, far and beyond what I told you about. But they do some different things with the story. And Aaron, you mentioned you were a fan of the Jason Bourne series. It feels the first three almost like more of a Jason Bourne movie, especially this one.
I like that.
Interesting.
Because they make it personal. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give away any spoilers. They just make it personal. There is the Spectre threat. There are global issues and global threats, but this is the most personal of James Bond's films, other than the one where he got married in the 60s. That was probably the most personal they got. This one. So anyway,
he's interesting. He's more of like, I don't know. He was some of this. You would seem like, now again, they're not serialized. The amount of stuff that guy goes through, you think he'd be crippled by now.
Of course.
And it's Hollywood, whatever. That's the one thing I did like about the third Batman film. Even though nobody likes the third Batman, Dark Knight Rises, was that his cartilage was shot.
Look,
the Batman, the Dark Knight. Yeah, I like that. And nobody liked them. Like I like Bane. I thought Bane was cool. But the fact that Batman's cartridge was shot, he was old, he was beat up, and I'm like, yeah, that seems realistic. Like that. I mean, he was walking with a cane and stuff. But I liked Bond. I think when I lost interest in Bond was, I think the Brosnan or the Goldeneye, the guy starring Goldeneye, the one who played Bond in Goldeneye. I can't remember his name.
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan. Mm-hmm. Those got super ridiculous. Like I still remember. And again, I'm not a stickler for reality, but sometimes Bond stretches out. I remember he was driving a tank around in one of them, and he was sitting in the turret on top, shooting the tank. And I'm like, how is he doing that?
How is he driving and shooting at the same time?
How is he doing?
It's a 2-person job.
It's it's 2-3 person. Yeah, it's so. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure how he's But I mean, and so that was like,
And then there was
and to
Roger
me,
Moore.
right, it was like it pushed it to like Bond. I always thought kind of a little bit in reality, and then they started pushing it where he's sort of getting ridiculous. I know that Daniel Craig's have brought that back down, like it's much more based on what could really happen. I think now, after I said that, I think I did watch Casino Royale, which I think is his
Did you?
first one, right? Yeah, and I
Yes,
like
yes.
that one. The Bond character, I think the reason why I also kind of lost interest in him is there's just nothing. He's such a one note character, and maybe Daniel Craig's has changed. It's like, he goes on the mission, gets the girl, saves the day, and there's just nothing much else with that character. Maybe Daniel Craig's movies have changed that, but by that time I'd already kind of written it off like, well, I've already seen that story 100 times, so I just didn't care.
I think
So
you may want to give Daniels a chance, at least jump to Skyfall.
okay,
And I think if you start with Skyfall, you'll go ahead and roll through Spectre, and then you'll watch this one. I think you'll enjoy them because they address the issues that you mentioned. I think they
okay,
intentionally wanted to make these more personal stories for the character as a human being more than as a superhero.
yeah, because that's what
And
they made him out, and I didn't.
yeah, yeah,
Like, I know
and
MI6
they
is
do that here. And to be honest, as a fan of the books, in the novels, for those of you who are curious about reading some of the Ian Fleming novels, he ends up in the hospital usually at the end of his adventures because he barely escapes with his life. And I remember when I saw Die Hard for the first time, and I was telling a friend of mine, I said, "That's what James Bond books are like." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, because he always gets in these situations where he's barefooted, there's broken glass on the floor,
yeah,
he's lost, his gun is out of bullets, or whatever. See, in the books, Bond gets in those impossible situations, and it's only because of his wits and his, I guess, just determination and grit that he finds his way out.
finds his way
And
out of
so
it.
that element of the cool, suave guy in the tuxedo, it's there, but not nearly as much in the books. In the books, he
Interesting.
puts that on to get into the room with the bad guys. But as the story goes on, he gets so messed up and beat down that he's near dead by the end of the adventure. So I would definitely say,
Yeah.
if you like realism with a little fantasy sprinkled
Yeah,
in,
I don't mind a
the
little fantasy.
books
It's just
give
when you
you that.
break it beyond all stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
the movie
yeah,
Gravity did that. And I like
yeah,
astronomy. There was a lot of things where like and like Star Wars, this is the way I look at science fiction. Star Wars, you're gonna break, physics or whatever because it's fantasy. But if you put
sure,
NASA in the movie, you better stay a little bit close to reality because NASA's
gotcha.
in the movie. And so when you
Right.
start going through movies and NASA's in it, but we're gonna break physics, I'm like, no, that's stupid. You
Can't
can't. I
break
mean,
physics when you
you're
got
dealing
NASA
with
in
the
it.
National Aeronautics and Space Administration. I mean, come on, they're
Yeah,
studying science. You can't. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, again, you like more grounded stories. A lot of people buy into it
yeah,
that way. A lot of people like more fantasy. I just look for it to be well written. If it's a well written story, if the characters are consistent, I can go into it either way. I can watch Tim Burton's Batman. I can watch Chris Nolan's Batman and
yeah.
enjoy them both for what they are. If you say, well, Dean, what would you rather watch? I would love to find a hybrid Batman story that does what Jon Favreau did with Iron Man 1, where there's
Yeah.
just enough fantasy, but just enough reality. I think Zack Snyder was trying to do that. He
And
probably got the
Zack Snyder,
closest.
I think Zack Snyder's Batman was and I was a huge fan of The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah,
Frank
me too.
Miller. And so Ben Affleck's Batman really nailed that. The fight scene in Batman versus Superman, when Batman fought him in the warehouse, was the epitome of how I thought Batman would fight. He's just a
Yeah, me
force of
too.
nature. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that was like that to me. I'm like, yeah, this is how this guy would be. He would just be like on them, like just he would just be like a force of nature, just a flurry of fists or whatever. So I really like that. I like Christopher Nolan's Batman. Um, and then, of course, I'm like, it's not now after hearing about Michael Keaton, I always felt sorry for him in the movie because he could barely move in that suit. He couldn't hear
I know,
anything.
right?
The poor guy. They said, I remember in an interview, they said like he'd be on set and he's like, I have to go to the bathroom, and he's like, they're sitting there unbolting me because they would bolt him into the suit, like they're literally undoing the bolts. Like I just gotta pee, man. So yeah, he said that apparently I read somewhere that he still fits in the suit. Apparently, yeah, I don't
That's
know.
pretty cool. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool. I I like the aesthetics, not necessarily the movement limitations. I
Yeah.
think that Nolan's designers did the best job at this practical yet defensive reality-based suit.
Right.
I
At
thought
least it didn't
that's
have
really
nipples.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
goodness,
Yeah.
right? Thank goodness for
Well,
that.
the one thing I did like about Ben Affleck's one is he just looked like a powerhouse, which again, that's what I thought he
Yes,
would be.
yes,
Like he would just
yes.
be this absolute powerhouse of a man.
Yeah, I like that too. I like the more reality-based heroes as well. I really liked Marvel's take on Daredevil, the television series. Did you guys like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I did
You know, the
not
funny
see.
thing is, I love the first season. The second season was okay. And then they make a season
Yeah,
3. I
they
think they
did, but
made
it
it.
was meh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The first
it was
season
all
was
right.
great when he was coming into his
It
own and
was.
stuff, and the way he fought in
Yeah,
that one hallway scene. That to me was like, okay, yeah, that was really cool.
that's
Yeah, they kind of
Daredevil.
nailed him in
Yeah,
that one. Um,
yeah, they really did. Wouldn't that be cool though to take that aesthetic, that sense of action and
yeah.
tone, and do a Batman series where he's just fighting street criminals? I just
I
thought, man,
think
that
that's
was
what they're going for in this. The Batman, the one coming out, I think that's kind of the take they're going for. Is he's much more street level with his car and stuff.
oh, okay,
He even the way
okay,
he, if you look at his boots, it looks like he's just wearing your basic military boots. Like he just cobbled the costume together.
uh huh.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I've heard it called year two, kind of. Like he's still
yeah,
What do you
early
have
in his career.
as a
What do
dream
you
cast
have
for
as a
Batman?
yeah.
dream cast for Batman? I really want to see Matthew Fox since his
That would be cool.
racer was. That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
good call. Good call, Interfan.
What do you guys feel about
That's
the guy who's playing the new Batman? He was from Twilight. I don't remember his name, and I feel
Oh God.
Pattinson.
Yeah,
Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson,
Yeah,
Pattinson.
I
the
think he
sparkly
could.
vampire.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't want to prejudge. I know
Because we
these
did that
guys
with
work really
Keaton.
hard a lot of
Yeah,
times to be those characters. I want to see it first. The trailer looks okay. I can honestly say I was more excited about Affleck than
yeah,
than Rob Pattinson. I don't know. We'll
yeah,
see.
yeah.
We'll
I don't
see.
know. I'd be I mean, my big one was Wonder Woman. I know Gal Gadot's growing on me as Wonder Woman. Um,
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I
Absolutely.
I
like
still
Gal
think she's
Gadot
a
as Wonder
little
Woman.
too skinny. Wonder Woman, I think, should be more bulkier. The one that I always thought would be a perfect Wonder Woman, and my girlfriend thought that too. My ex or my friend Summer, was Lucy Lawless. That's what we always
Yeah.
wanted to see because she played Xena. But again, she's just too old for that, obviously, right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She's grown on me. I think they've done some good stuff with as Wonder Woman, but yeah, Wonder Woman I still think should be more of a powerhouse than she is, like almost like Kara or whatever in the
Yeah. Cara
Mandalorian.
Dune, a more Gina
Yeah,
Carano level,
a
where you got
bulk.
developed. Yeah. A little
Yeah,
bulkier. Yeah.
and I
That
understand
that's
they
yeah.
wouldn't do that because they want the sex appeal, but that's how I always envisioned her as this Amazon. It's just ripped. I remember there was a cartoon they did, and I think it was. Did you ever read the comic The New Frontier?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I
Okay,
know of
yeah,
it. Yes.
yeah. It's
Yes.
the Justice League. They did one where
Yeah.
Superman went and visited like Wonder Woman as Amazon, where she's helping this tribe of women or whatever. And I remember in the cartoon, I think in the comic too, she was almost like 7 foot tall. I mean, she just was like this hulking beast of a woman that towered over Superman. I'm like, that's an Amazon. That's just. I
That's
was
an
like, that
Amazon,
was
darn it.
cool. I've never seen anything
Yeah.
like that. I'm like, that's awesome. Yeah,
If you watch the first, which you have, the
yeah,
first hour of Zack Snyder's Justice League, you really get a good feel. I love his take on the
yeah.
Amazons. I thought he did a great
I
job.
thought, yeah, that whole scene in the Amazon when they're chasing, yeah, that was.
Yeah,
He
they're
really.
they're beautiful. They look capable. They look
Yeah,
badass. They look ripped. They look like they can do what they're doing. It's just like, yep, Amazons. They should be like
yeah,
Greek Scandinavian women.
Tommy
I'm gonna
says,
love
"I'm
a
gonna."
sparkly Batman with nipples. Wow,
yeah,
nice,
yeah.
Tommy.
Sparkly
Love
vampires.
it,
Yeah, yeah.
man.
Did either one of you guys watch WandaVision?
I
I did
watched the
not.
first
How was
episode,
that?
and Me and
I
my friend
haven't.
Summer. I usually watch TV with my friend. She's my ex-girlfriend, but we're best friends, so we still hang out, watch TV all together. So I usually watch TV with her. We tried WandaVision, and I don't even think we got to the first episode. I usually know a show's not going to work if me and her start talking in the middle of the episode, and then we're like, "What's going on?" And it's like, "Okay, we
Yeah,
need to watch something."
I
And we've
didn't.
done this many a time. And
I
then I've
didn't
had
care
her
for.
also stare at me. Like I'll watch a show, and then halfway through, she's just looking at me, and I'm like, "You're not liking it." She's like, "No," and I'm like, "Okay."
Okay.
I
So
never liked the character in the first place in the MCU, so I didn't follow it over there. But
yeah.
I've read that they're going to have an Agatha Harkness spinoff.
Apparently she's a
Oh,
big
interesting.
the first episode they say you just got to get the thing is that people, which is never a good selling point for any series, you just got to get through the first 3 episodes. Then that's not a good selling point for
See,
the
I'm
series,
out.
dude.
I'm out at
Yeah,
that
you
point.
can't.
If you're
I'm
gonna
not
take
going to
that
struggle
long,
through
Mhm.
something so it gets good. It should, catch my interest at the beginning. Yeah, it just wasn't my thing. I don't really have much investment in Wanda or the Vision, anyways.
Well,
She's an okay character. I mean, I like some of the stuff they did in her. She was psychotic in the book, like she would freak out and destroy reality. And like I thought that was kind of cool. I didn't like again. Her
it's basically
powers are
what she
supposed
did.
to be. I think she's a witch. I remember her powers are hex based. So you can make like good luck or bad luck, like things happen. And then in the movies, you don't know what her powers are. She wiggles things, and then
Well,
people like.
apparently, WandaVision is basically all she's twisting reality. That's
Mm,
all it is. But uh, I mean, I know a little bit about Agatha Harkness from the comic books. She's psychic.
okay.
And apparently she was popular enough from the WandaVision series that they're going to do a spin-off of her. So that might be interesting. I might check in on that.
Yeah. The Vision was an
I'm
interesting character. I know a lot of people really like him. I never, and even as a kid,
I
I
didn't care
never
for him.
understood why Marvel, and this is maybe in American comics, superhero comics always gave robots muscles. I just never, even like the X-Men Sentinels would be like this big muscled guys. Like, why do these robots have muscles? This is just,
Just make
so
a
I don't,
tube.
I know. It's
make
like,
it too.
there was, I know it was like, I think it
Danger,
was
Will Robinson.
Frank quietly drew the Sentinels in New X-Men or something later on and made them almost insect looking or whatever. I thought, oh, that was really cool. But yeah, I never got like the tube and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
They never did. And so when I saw like the Vision, he's a human, but he's a robot. And I'm like, okay, he's Data. He's Data with a
Yeah.
cape.
Right. Okay. So you just saw a movie with Tom Hardy. I have heard rumors that Tom Hardy is on the short list to be James Bond, but also Henry Cavill, who's my pick to be the next James Bond. What are your thoughts on Tom? Pros and cons.
Tom
Tom
Hardy.
Hardy?
I don't see him.
I don't
I
see
See, I
don't
don't
see
see
him.
him either because I see
Yeah.
him more as a villain character.
He's more of an every man. Yeah, I mean, Bond is supposed to be full of sex appeal and stuff like that. And Tom is great and everything like that, but he doesn't do it for me in the sex department.
Well,
he's just
Yeah.
an everyman.
I
That's
just
for
sent
you get
I
Herbie.
sent a
Nice.
picture.
You take the abs
to
off a
Aaron.
robot and you get Herbie.
Yeah, I sent a picture to Aaron. Aaron, post that shot. This is a shot of Henry Cavill in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Reimagining movie a few years back. And I thought that was his audition to be Bond. I really did because it was so perfect. In the meantime, welcome to our friend Brent. How are you, sir? Glad you could join us. How's everything going?
Not too bad. I walked in right as Barb was talking about someone's abs and sex appeal, this and that. So I really don't know what's going on.
What timing there, my friend? I mean, think about that, right? I mean, look.
We're talking about whether
I
Tom
mean,
Hardy would make a good Bond, and I'm like,
I heard that they wanted to make Bond a woman now, didn't they?
Well, they have
Wasn't
a lot
that-
of ideas.
Yeah.
I think they decided they were gonna stay with the male. Just they have like a half a dozen people on the list. I just thought it was fascinating when I saw
That's the
there's
Henry
Man from
Cavill.
U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my
I could-
my pick.
I could
I
see.
thought at one
yeah.
time they were talking about Tom Hiddleston too.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Nah, I
heard
don't
too.
see that at all. He's much more of a goofier character. The guy who plays Loki.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Maybe he could sell me. I don't know. I could see Henry Cavill was my two. I grew up with Christopher Reeves, but I really loved Henry Cavill's Superman. I thought they both did a
Yeah.
fantastic job.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I'm still trying to wrap my head around Tom Hardy's Bond.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
we
was
can't. I can't do
Yeah.
it. That was
out there as a
I'm just trying to
rumor.
go
I don't
like,
know how. Yeah, I don't know how
hello,
real
Money
it is.
Penny.
I know.
Shaken, not stirred. Have you known
like John,
my-
did they make a James Bond Jr. show? Was there a James Bond?
Those cowards need to make James Bond Jr. live action. Yeah, wouldn't that be?
Wasn't
fun,
there? Was there a
right?
cartoon that was like a James Bond Jr.
There was
cartoon?
a James Bond Jr. Sure.
You're
I
kidding.
didn't even know that. You
No,
know,
man.
honestly, I don't know who would make a good Bond. I mean, it always just throws me when Henry Cavill speaks in interviews because I forget he's British.
Yeah,
Because I usually see him in American movies. Yeah. But he's a big. I don't even know if Henry Cavill would be into it. He's a huge like nerd into video games
He is
and
a
comics
big
and
nerd.
sci-fi, and so I think he would probably much more go for something fantasy or sci-fi than James Bond. I could be wrong
Possible.
about that, but I'd say, I mean, because he went after the Witcher series, Geralt of Rivia.
Mhm.
He
Yeah,
went after that
yeah.
personally.
He did an awesome
Which
job.
I thought he did a good job. Yeah.
I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but he was gorgeous in that.
Yeah. He's so I definitely can see him. I think he, you know, it's funner to have him. I mean, you can see a passion for that role. So
You
I
hear
can see him
Yeah.
doing something like
they're going to
that.
do an 8-issue miniseries of Interview with a Vampire.
Really?
Oh, is that right?
Yep, AMC is going to do it, and they've already cast Lestat, Sam Reed as Lestat.
Sam
I
Reeves
don't, I don't know him, his work, but I looked him up on the internet, and he would fit the character physically. And they're going to do,
Interesting.
and Jacob Anderson is going to be Lewis. And he also fits the part.
Oh
physically.
yeah,
always
that fits.
remember-
Okay.
I never, nothing against personally against Anne Bryson. Maybe I do. I never liked her vampires. My favorite vampires are always the Lost Boys. That was my favorite. It's just like these punks.
You
They're
like
just absolute like
punk
killers.
vampires.
Yeah. And then they made them
Punk
like, well,
virus.
these girly frilly things. I'm like, no, stop that. No.
She was taking
Please.
it down a completely different world, you know.
And they were Victorian England. I mean, it was supposed to be a different world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, she
there was
loves.
a-
I
Early
used to
American-
love. I used to
American
love the.
vampires. Yes.
Yeah, I used to love the Vampire Lestat books, and then I got
Yeah.
one of them when they went to town on a gal on her cycle. I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's-
I'm
It
not
gets pretty
seeing
dark.
this
You know, this is kind of interesting. I think, if I'm correct, Stephen King's vampire novel predated Anne
Is this
Rice.
true?
Oh, I'm sure.
And
I don't know.
he when he
Salem's
wrote
Lot?
Salem's Lot.
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah.
he is right. Infrafan is right. The original vampire, the oldest
Didn't
ones.
her
back-
vampires turn out to be aliens?
They didn't come from Earth. The originals, they from ancient Egypt. That is correct.
Interesting. I did not
Okay.
know that. Yeah, I
So
never read
Egypt,
Salem's
then
Lot.
we do the whole Stargate thing. Is that where?
I guess. My favorite vampire story was a video game series called the Legacy of Kain series. Anyone out there in internet land know this? You might know this. That was a really cool video game series, but it was like this guy Kain who just eventually conquered the world, which made sense that he could do this. And the thing was kind of trippy is eventually through the game, as you play Kain, this guy turns into a
Mhm.
vampire. He conquers the world, and at the end of the first game, you can decide to make the world benevolent or evil. And of course, the game's like, well, you chose evil, like the sequels did. But it was like all the vampires were starving because they'd eaten everything. And so you had this other god, this sort of Lovecraftian god that would like weave souls, and he couldn't weave souls because everything was living forever. So he sent back this vampire general called Raziel, who was a soul stealer. He would like suck souls in. So he sent him back to go kill the vampire, suck the souls, and kill Cain to restart the whole effect. And it was really cool because in the game you could actually time travel to like back and forth as land of Nosgoth. And so so Emperor knows that game. Yes, it does need to be revamped. It's a great series. You're in the video game. It's a fantastic series.
Thank you very much.
Even double pun, but yeah,
We'll be
the
here all
series and
week.
stuff.
That's right,
It was
that's
really
right.
cool because they eventually in the game, like the vampires would actually evolve. So it was supposed to be thousands of years. So you had ones that would evolve into like being in water, ones that evolve into spiders because they're just thousands of years would evolve in these things.
Yeah.
It was a really
Yeah.
cool concept, and it took like the D&D fantasy world and wrapped around this whole vampire mythos. And the series and the storyline was fantastic, but I guess they don't.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah.
I think if you look at King, what King did with Salem's Lot is he basically was one of the first to take the vampires out of the theatrical Victorian idea and put them in your suburban neighborhood. And so, you view the story through a young teenage boy who's a geek and who loves monster movies and stuff. And he's convinced that, in the town, people are disappearing and there's this house and it's, it's haunted and the vampire servant has taken up residence there. And it's basically Dracula in suburbia kind of
Didn't
thing.
they kind of did the same thing with that movie Fright Night? I wonder if those two related at all.
Yeah, that was later, but yeah,
well,
they
Fright Night
took
was
that.
a comedy, so
Yeah. King's book is definitely a horror story, but I thought it was clever because he said basically, he wanted to bring Dracula into sort of the American culture, and he did a great job doing that. And the vampire hunters tend to be just a 15-year-old boy that you identify with if you're around that age and you're reading it. And then, the author who comes back to his hometown to write a story about the haunted house that happens to be the vampire's headquarters. And so, it works out really well. And then Anne Rice sort of took it back to a more European,
the traditional Dracula.
More literary feel. But I heard they're remaking Salem's Lot. It's supposed to come out next year. So the guys who made it, the latest
I could see them. It I thought was the only thing about they did do, but they didn't do it as cool. Is they kind of didn't completely show his alien form. They showed him kind of at the end as a spider, but in the original book he's supposed to be like a giant spider. But everything else was great.
Well, one fun thing about vampires, if you think about it, is they're so firmly fixed in our culture, they're no longer considered anything. I mean, Blade was a vampire action movie. Bram Stoker's Dracula was kind of like a weird, like gothic period piece. The Twilight stories are full on tween fiction. Things that you never would have thought about doing like 50 years ago.
Well, they took them away from being these like bloodthirsty monsters, and they made them more like these sort of anti or tragic characters, which the original Dracula, that'd be kind of cool of what Infra fan is saying. If you called it Alien meets Dracula.
That's kind of Interfan says he just found out that they're turning the section of the Dracula novel where he's coming to America on the Clipper ship, that they're turning that
I could see him getting like loose on the ship and just terrorizing the ship. That would be
that's what he basically
really,
did.
Isn't that what happened in the book? Yeah,
that's what happened in the book. So cool idea.
I think it's funny.
You're
right.
Didn't he eat all the rats on the ship?
I think so.
I think he ate everything.
My favorite vampire story is written by H.P. Lovecraft, and I can't remember the name of the story, but it was like the coolest concept I've ever seen of a vampire. And it was like these two guys were like this. They went in this house with vampires buried there. And if I'm trying to remember the story, but the vampire would like start like infecting the area around it. Like they'd see like certain fungus growing or certain strange things. Like his evil was so permeating, would start permeating the ground or whatever. And I don't even think the vampire had an actual body. It was more like this sort of entity that like sucked the life out. It's a short story and I can't remember what it's called, but these two guys were in there waiting for the vampire to come alive or something to kill it. They were hunters. And they went there during the day and wait for him to rise. But the way he did the vampire was like this force of nature. Like it had transcended its human form and was like this entity. It was really, really cool. That was like, cool. I was like,
that sounds cool. Was it called the Shunned House?
Maybe that was it. I think that's what it was. It's a really short story, but it was like really
Shunned House.
One of my favorite Lovecraft stories. And but yeah, I always liked. I didn't mind the Anne Rice vampires, but I like the Blade, like you said, the Blade vampires. They actually create this entire culture where they're living underneath it and stuff. And so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, very creative.
Have you guys seen What We Do in the Shadows?
That show.
I have not.
Vampire comedy.
Vampire comedy.
Taika Waititi's first movies.
Yeah.
I saw it. It was an interesting take. They're trying
It
to
was
fit in.
yeah, I love that. Strange trivia thing about that Fright Night movie. I found that the guy who played the so-called Dracula character always considered his character to be like a fruit bat, like he turned into a fruit bat. So if you watch the film, he's always eating fruit in the movie.
Interesting.
And
You
this
must
was
be
the
talking about the
actor's
first
personal
version,
take
right?
on it. What?
Yeah.
You're talking about the first version, probably the one.
Yeah,
from
the first
80s,
version.
right?
He would
first
eat
version.
apples and fruit and always have it around because he was like, I was like, oh,
That's
That's
funny.
that's kind of cool.
that's
Yeah,
The
he told.
remake is really good too, actually.
yeah,
Which one?
they're both
Yeah, I thought the remake was pretty good. The classic was that sort of classic. Apparently, I also found that like when he turns into like they kill him in the end, he turns into like the skeleton bat form.
Hmm.
That prop was originally supposed to be used in Ghostbusters. Was made
Oh,
for
wow.
Ghostbusters. Was cut out of the movie for some reason, and so they just took it and used it in that movie. I'm like, oh,
There's
I don't know.
something
Do you know who designed all the monsters in the Ghostbusters movie?
was it Stan Winston? No, who was it?
No, I
Do
think
you
that.
know anyone else besides Stan Winston?
The original Ghostbusters. It was Bernie. Bernie
Bernie
Wrightson.
Wrightson?
Kidding.
Yeah.
What?
Oh,
can see
awesome. That is really awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring something up that Aaron, that you touched on just in a message earlier, talking about with the advent of manga being so popular in the business here that we're all in this visual storytelling business, and you shared a video with me that was basically asking the question. This person didn't believe that social media was enough to sell comic book titles, and he also didn't believe that the cover was enough to get somebody to come into a Barnes and Noble or whatever, a brick and mortar store, and buy a particular book. And one of the suggestions he had was label the books so that people know what they are. And then one of my suggestions was label the sections similar to how Blockbuster used to label video areas,
mystery
right?
section,
So
thrillers,
you'd have like horror, sci-fi,
Yeah.
fantasy, drama, romance, whatever, mystery. And I thought more about that, and I really want to get you guys' take on what you think about, instead of labeling, like they really don't label much other than like mature, the adult section, and then here are all the superheroes over here. What if you actually separated the titles out based on content? What would that do, guys? Would that help sales? Would it not matter?
I think it would help people who are looking for it. I know in comic shops, even I have to. They actually almost kind of organize stuff a little bit by company, which is really weird. Like Image stuff, Marvel, DC stuff. But I do think genres of people who are new into it, just you're wandering around the store and you can't find. I mean, if you're finding, they do have a kids book section and they have a manga section and then they have all the American comic section, and they just mix everything together. So you find horror, fantasy, horror, superhero, horror, and it just goes, and it's very disjointed. But it'd be great if you can go in, like if I wanted to, like, I heard of this new horror comic, I want to go to the horror section to see if they have it.
Yeah.
Every other store, every other place that organizes any sort of books or movies does this, but comic shops. And I don't know if it's just because of straight that's pretty good.
Well, what? Bring up the comments here.
Put beaded curtains on your
beaded curtains on your Very nice. Very nice.
But yeah. I don't know if it's enough real estate, maybe. I'm not.
You know what I think it is? It's effort, because the owners would have to know a lot about the titles, and I guess you could solve that with maybe requiring the publishers to label the content,
science fiction or horror,
when you're ordering it.
Yeah.
Is this a sci-fi comic? Is this fantasy comic? Superhero comic? Is it horror? Is it romance? Is it adult? Is it action? Whatever it is.
Even when I go to the comic shop, I know that when I go to comic shops, they will, if I, because my comic shop said, when you're done with Goblins, we'll put it up. And they'll put it up in the indie comic section. But why not just put that into like the fantasy section?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's because if people go to indie comics, like, well, a lot of people, if they hear the word indie, they mentally think, well, not as polished as regular comics, not as good as regular comics. And of course we know that a lot of indie stuff could be just as good or almost better, but it's a mental thing. And so if you just didn't call them indies and just put them in with all the DC Marvel stuff, then it would give us a chance. And it would like, well, this is with Marvel and DC, so there's not that negative connotation to it being indie.
What if we just called it American manga?
Yeah, you could do something like that.
Right?
It's weird because they were talking. There was a guy who wrote in the comments that he was at a comic book store and he said he went on. He did a mailing. He mailed 10,000 ads to locally around his area with this coupon coming to the store or whatever. He said he got 2 people in, 2 out of the 10,000.
Oh,
Okay.
geez.
Wow.
And then he said he went to this local mall that was holding a convention and was selling comics and put the same coupon and stuff in the books and said, come to the store, here's a coupon for the store. Huge uptick.
Hmm.
And they were talking, because the whole thing is talking about the social media really translate the sales. For majority of people, no. And I don't think that's any fault of the person not wanting to buy it. I think it's the attention span the internet brings. If you're scrolling through Facebook or whatever, your attention span is so quick, and most time you don't remember 2 posts you saw away.
Right.
Like, oh, that's cool, whatever. Oh, I like it, or whatever. And they're saying people liking it doesn't engage them to go get it.
Right.
And so it's not translating. And I think a lot of people, because he was arguing, he was basically arguing the fact that oh, sorry, Roland, I'll show Roland's. There you go. Is my literally translate? Yeah, is that you're simply saying American comics as manga literally translate the comics? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could argue Joe Mad, who did Battle Chasers, is considered the start of American manga.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I was
but
being
you can
facetious
argue that's a
because
style of American comics, not necessarily American manga. So
right,
that's
right,
either
right,
or. You can go
right.
back
Right. I
and
was more
stuff.
being
Yeah.
facetious in saying that since manga is so popular, but it's really just comic books, you know, you just
Yeah.
I mean, it used to have more to me, it used to have more of a meaning. Now it's just comics, you know. I mean, manga has its style, but it's really just comic books drawn in their house style. That's all it is, you know.
Roland, did you want? Okay. He wanted
Roland
to ask.
just
Okay, yeah,
wants
he's
to
at.
come set everybody straight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
it
gonna
does.
come set everything. Okay, so yeah, but yeah, they're not translating the sale. I mean, I'll go to a convention and sell books all the time. You know, like I'll sell decent
Yeah.
amount of books online. Very rarely do I get people, and I think it's just attention span. It's so hard, and I just think you get lost in the shuffle. I don't
Of course.
think it's people don't want to buy your stuff. I think, you know, advertisers talk about, you know, you have to get hook them within like seconds to get it. In the internet, those seconds have gone down lower and lower and lower to milliseconds of catching them, and it's like this is why they're adding. I guess, you know.
We're moving past India
Yeah.
as a label anyway because of the internet and its accessibility to everything. India is no more
Yeah.
a label than foreign. Yeah, you're right, Fan. I mean,
I think it is. I think a
absolutely
comic
right.
shop, it's still a label, but I think on the internet it is not. Even though a lot of times that my comic would be considered part of the indie comic scene, I don't think most people feel that it is lower. I think it's becoming less and less. It is weird that they have an indie comics in a store. I mean, you would never have indie books in a bookstore.
Right, right.
So I always find that kind of a weird take on that, but they, you know,
that's because DC and Marvel have dominated for so long that if it isn't DC or Marvel, it's indie.
It's indie.
Yeah.
The fact that people still consider Image indie, and I'm like, are you high? Image is mainstream.
30 years old now. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so.
Well, I know you have indie books in the bookstore, but do you have a section called indie books? That's what I'm asking. I haven't seen it, but maybe they do.
Which is the biggest comic book purveyor of comics in Orlando, several stores. That's basically how they do it. Marvel, DC, and Indie.
Yeah.
Half the books in the Indie section are Image, but they still, I guess,
because Marvel and DC is so ingrained in the American psyche that it's either those two and everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also output too. I mean, if you look at what Marvel and DC put out, they have enough books coming out monthly to actually fill a pretty sizable section on the wall versus everyone else who, I mean, it doesn't mean their books are less in quality. I'm sure there's lots of arguments for the contrary. It's just Image. I don't think Image puts out like 36 books a month. So they get stuck with the other indie books.
Yeah. It's weird that in this industry that you have such a thing as independent comics, that Marvel and DC are considered professional or corporate, and everything below is considered indie. like, in other words, like it is below that, not
Like
professional.
amateur comics.
Amateur comics. That's what,
Yeah.
even though people think indie doesn't denote that, that's what it denotes in people's heads. Amateur comics.
Yeah, like Bone
And
or Hellboy would be amateur comics. Yeah,
yeah, and of course they're not. They've had movies
they're
made
not.
out of them
Yeah,
and stuff. I think I would disagree a little bit with Roland in that I know Image is technically indie comics, but I just think if you get enough of a market, if you're like the third largest company behind like Dark Horse, Image, Marvel, DC, you're up there with the corporate produced comics. Yes, they are making comics that are creator owned or whatever, but you have enough of a shelf space that you are defeating. I mean, in other words, if you're going to mix Image in with like the indie scene of like our company, I mean, how do those two compare?
I think what you're going for there is, how do we delineate now? Because we have reached the point where comics have grown into pop culture's sensibilities, that we have to decide, how do we differentiate? Is it more important to do Marvel and DC?
Yeah.
Is it more important to separate by subject or content? Maybe it's time to separate by subject and content, because the equivalent would be, okay, walking into a video store. Imagine this in 1995. You walk into a video store. Okay, all the Warner Brothers comics are over here. All the Paramount movies are over here.
Yeah.
All the, you don't do that. No, it's like horror, action, thrill. Nobody cares who made them, really. I mean, nobody cares whether it's Paramount or Warner Brothers. And that's what we're doing with comics. It's like, maybe it's time to let go of who's publishing them and say, no, this is the content. Now, for us, as trying to make our name, it's a different thing, because you have to be something. You have to brand. But for these guys, they're already branded, But comics, I don't know if they need to be branded. I know what you're saying, Aaron, in terms of the pejorative nature of calling something an indie comic.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is pejorative anymore. Roland just told me that his students don't care about Marvel and DC. They just want a good comic book.
But I still get that. Like, if when I'm at a comic convention, I do get this sense, especially with my book, that, well, I've never heard of this, you're making this, so it's not as good as quality as like Marvel, DC. More people are willing to put down money based on Marvel, Disney properties, Marvel. They're willing to put that money down, and that just goes probably towards advertising. But when it comes to my stuff, there is that sense of unsureness. Is it good? Is it Disney or Marvel or corporate stuff? Well, there's a certain quality. I expect it to be a certain level of quality. So there's a certain trust there that's built with brand.
Right.
Independent comics has that problem with not reaching that trust or brand to get people to put down the money to buy it. This is what I kind of mean by that sort of pejorative. It's almost there. Like you're striking a little bit of lack of trust in the person, because even if they look at my stuff like, I really like this, they're still like,
Well, you know what broke that? What breaks through that? The genre that tends to break out of that mold of low expectations for independent material is the horror genre. In the 70s, it was John Carpenter with Halloween. More recently, it was Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who those people were. It was just Blair Witch Project, And because it was so unique, it was the content that put them over. It wasn't the producers.
Nobody had ever seen anything like Blair Witch when it came out.
Right.
And the advertising for that movie was brilliant. Because, I mean, was it real? Was it not?
Exactly. And they had a wonderful sort of promotional campaign, which I think every indie publisher's challenge right now is, what can we do to get noticed? And that's why when you brought that up in the message today, I thought that's a really good question. What can Silverline do to get noticed? Do we start to talk about our content of our titles more to get people to understand? I think communication of our content is the key.
It might help a little bit. I'm not. Yeah, because Roland was talking about, it sounds that company brand helping, and I think branding helps.
True. Yes.
And I think, but again, like branding, like anything, takes time, and I think it's catching on. I mean, I think we're keeping with the brand. I think that's important. But again, the one thing about branding, and this is the one thing, and I don't have an answer for this. This is why I know why even I come into trouble with this branding. Branding denotes a certain quality or expectation. Okay, so for instance, when you when they put the McDonald's logo, that branding, it's it's French fries, it's the American sort of fast food, it's that sort of image. And that just takes time, years to build that. And so I
Right.
think there has to be kind of a cohesive message behind the branding. And I think a lot of problems, like a lot of comic publishers have, is don't we don't like stay in specific genres. We're kind of publishers or whatever. So I think a lot of companies publish all different sorts of genres. That's why I sometimes wondered if we would like rebrand itself as like the horror comic publisher or the fantasy, comic publisher, would we have more traction because we were hitting a specific target audience instead of everyone come in.
Yeah.
And for some odd reason, I don't know why that you would think that would work more if it's for everyone come in, but it doesn't.
I think that's a
work as
perfect
much.
brand, something for everyone.
Yeah, but unfortunately, every time I've heard advertisers talk, that's not targeting specific audiences. And I'm not saying if I'm right or wrong. This is saying what I've heard. Like if you target a specific audience, you're going to get much more of a turnaround.
Yeah, I think,
and I've seen that too.
I think part of the key. I don't think we may not have the exact answer yet, but we're heading in the right direction, and that is we want to have the reputation of quality, content, professional turnaround time, delivery of the product on time.
Reliability.
And that stuff I think is be perfect Silverline. And maybe that's something we need to push on branding. That would be, Silverline, something,
reliable.
We get it to you on time, reliable, whatever. I mean, the perfect branding out of our company is Curtis, the Kung Fu comic by the Kung Fu master. I mean, that's something that everyone's like, I should have thought of that. I'm not a Kung Fu master, but talk about a perfect branding slogan.
Yeah.
And just a perfect,
awesome?
The whole thing is just like, man, Curtis, you nailed that one.
The fantasy comic from the Fantasy Master. Hey,
Fantasy Master. I mean, you could do that.
I mean, you could bring that up. I mean, so
it's one of those. And branding, I'm still learning. I'm not a branding. I know, but a lot of people do have very focused branding that they do to build trust or whatever. Like I'm even trying to think like what is the Marvel and DC, like what is their initial branding? It seemed like DC is more high adventure and Marvel's more down to earth. At least that's what I always thought about them in my head as far as superhero differences, if that makes sense. Like
it's been so many decades
that
comic books had the idea of comic books had its own brand. It was for geeks or whatever. We're thankfully in a realm now, in a marketplace now where it's become mainstream. It's like, you got to get, you go get your magazines, your books, your comic books, your groceries, your this, your that. It's just part of the to get list. Let's go get some comic books, which is cool.
DC, it was weird that DC kept there is in a branding thing in our heads. When you think of DC and Marvel, there is a different vibe between two. Now I'm trying to think about how they did. They have kind of. I mean, there is a difference between them in our head, but I can't. Like DC is always like the classic superhero, and Marvel still branding themselves as kind of like the upstart kid.
I'm going to break in here for a second because I see that my laptop is about to die, so I'm going to sign off.
Barb, it's good to have you. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Talk to you later.
Bye, Barb.
Later.
I have an announcement here as we come to nearly the close of the show. As you know, Silverline is always launching good quality material, and we have a brand new Kickstarter Indiegogo campaign promotional video that I want to share with everyone. And I'm going to do that now, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Silverline Christmas Special. Here we go.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! It's Santa Claus, and I'm here to tell you about some Silverline crowdfunding stuff. You know Silverline. They're the comic book company that's an independent, genre-spanning, Silverline! They're getting ready to do one of my favorites. It's a Christmas special. Ho, 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 ho! You're going to see some of your classic old favorites of Silverline that you like Bear, and Cat and Mouse, and Divinity, and Demon's Tales, and Kalis, and Rochelle, and Teen Beetle, and Trunks, and Twilight Grim. But you're also going to see some new titles. You'll be introduced to them for the first time. Cake Town, Night Rise, Obsoletes, Satin's Ways, White Devil, and Wolf Hunter. That's right, all those are new to you. New to me too. I'm so ready for them. Christmas is my favorite time of year. You're going to see some of your favorite Silverline creators like Del Barris, Aiden Belcher, Mike Belcher, Mickey Clausen, Peter Clinton, Roberta Conroy, Brian Dale, Rob Davis, Thomas Floramonte, Thomas Hedgeland, Aaron Humphreys, R.A. Jones, Mark Kalberg, Jeremy Kahn, Brent T. Larson, Roland Mann, Haley Martin, John Medic, and Jackson Rennick. But you know what? There's also a bunch of new names for you Silverline fans. That's right. People like Dante Berry, Quinn Bedwell, Jim Diaglu, J.W. Franklin, Ron Fortier, you know his name, Jose Fuentes, Cassisi Harris, Richard June, Wes Loker, Henry Martinez, and Tim TK. That's right. It's gonna be grand. It's gonna be big. So make sure you pledge to the Silverline Christmas special now. It'll get to you in time for Christmas. It'll look good wrapped up under your tree or in your Christmas stocking. Make mine Silverline. Wait, that was supposed to be Merry Christmas.
Wow.
That's my favorite video he's done yet.
That's awesome.
Of course, Santa got
awesome.
He trimmed his beard. I don't remember Santa with the goatee.
I know, right? I expect him to silver and gold, silver and gold, Silverline and gold. You know, it was great. Great job, Roland. So that's our big announcement. Make sure everybody, we're getting to the point where it's getting close to that season, so we want to really promote the new Christmas special. And as far as I know, that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you for joining us. We will be here next week, as always, and we always like to close out our broadcast with "Make Mine
Silverline."
Silverline. Good night, everybody.